across the world on those counterintelligence decisions. But the problem is the government have come up with, on a number of occasions, measures that do more damage to Britain's traditional values, to our civil liberties here, than they do to the terrorists. And if you do that, if you take that approach, the terrorists win. We can't give terrorists victories. We need to defend our way of life and our values, just as we need to defend our country and our security against the terrorist threat.
It is vital to maintain our moral authority in dealing with it. That helps to keep us secure. And I think we're probably all agreed about that objective. Okay. But it is disappointing. One or two things are disappointing. For instance, the guidance on the treatment of detainees that the government promised, as part of showing we were being transparent about it, still hasn't been published. It hasn't been produced at all before the general election.
Just a quick one for Ed Davey before we move on. Can I just ask you, do you think we have too many people in this country working in the security service, the police counter-terrorist command, in these organisations that counter terrorism?
No, I don't. And actually,
so you wouldn't cut them?
They would not be on our list of cuts, no. Indeed, we need to use them to work with our friends abroad. I'll give you one example. I went to The Hague recently and visited Europol and saw some of the fantastic work that's being done to counter the terrorist threat, with all the 27 member countries across the European Union working together, bringing in the Americans, bringing in the Russians and other people to stop the terrorist threat. And what is so striking is the Conservatives have been against stronger powers for Europol. And I hope William Hague today on this programme, when we discuss Europe, will actually say, hold on a minute, we will allow Europol to have those powers, even though we previously voted against them.
Just quickly on intelligence cooperation, you stress the importance of an inquiry into what you call torture. You also
allegations of complicity in torture.
OK. You also talk about putting more distance between the UK and America. Do you expect America to share intelligence with Britain under those circumstances?
We've never said
in the same way that it always has done.
We've never said to put distance between ourselves and America. America is a very close ally and friend of Britain. The issue is this: we should not be an uncritical friend. What the Labour Party and the Conservative Party have done, the two old parties, is they've just agreed with whoever's in the White House. And look where that's got us. We agreed with President Bush when he was doing silly things which were damaging to Britain and indeed damaging to the world. Now, when President Obama came in, when he was senator, he opposed the Iraq War. Both Labour and the Conservative had to do the most dramatic U-turns in order to agree with a new incumbent at the White House. That's not a principled approach. It's not a valued approach, and it undermines Britain.
Who was the first British politician to go to Washington and say to the Bush administration, you should close Guantanamo Bay, you should redefine torture, you should deal with rendition flights? I did that when I was appointed Shadow Foreign Secretary. Where was the Liberal Party at that time?
We've been very critical of Guantanamo Bay, and you know
competition for Mr Hague or Mr Blair or Mr Davey goes to Washington. It was Tony Blair who was calling for the closure of Guantanamo from the beginning. And it's very, very important that we don't rewrite the history on this.
Not many of us can remember that.
Well, I'm sorry, it's very clear that...
Can you deny, Foreign Secretary, that by going to war in Iraq and Afghanistan, you have made this country a more dangerous place?
Yeah, I reject that entirely.
Entirely?
Entirely. In the year 2000, someone tried to blow up the centre of Birmingham. He tried to blow up the centre of Birmingham, and he's now serving a very long sentence rightly as a result of that. 9/11 happened well before the Iraq War. It's not as simple as you would like to make out. And the fact of the extremism that we face, it's deeply rooted. It is a global attempt to kill people of all religions. It strikes not just in places like London, but it strikes in Jordan, it strikes in Bali, it strikes in other parts of the world. And to reduce this to being an issue of the Iraq War, I think misunderstands the nature of the threat that we face.
All right. Let's move on to Britain's role in the world, gentlemen. Ed Davey, at a time when we can no longer take the US nuclear umbrella for granted, that the special relationship seems to be withering on the vine, or certainly not what it was, and even rogue regimes are acquiring nuclear weapons, why do you want us to get rid of ours?
We're not a unilateralist party. We believe that Britain may well need a nuclear deterrent going into the future.
Hey, wow.
Our position is that we don't agree with a like-for-like replacement of Trident. Trident was a Cold War nuclear deterrent, dreamt up in the 70s and 80s, so that at a push of a button you could destroy Moscow and St. Petersburg. That doesn't meet the security needs of Britain in the 21st century. So
I understand that you're against Trident. I see that, and you don't want to replace it like for like. I understand that.
Yes, indeed.
But would a Lib Dem government, or a government that the Lib Dems were part of in coalition, would it support a different new nuclear deterrent?
Yeah, we think there are a number of options that need to be looked at in the light of next month's Global Disarmament Conference in New York, where President Obama is talking about getting rid of nuclear weapons across the world, and also in the light of what we want to set up, which is a strategic security and defence review to look at all Britain's needs. It's only the Conservative and Labour... Let me finish this. It's only the Conservative and Labour Party who want to say now that we should have a like-for-like replacement of Trident ahead of the Disarmament Conference and ahead of the Security and Defence Review.
Let's say it's not Trident. Would we have a nuclear deterrent of some kind under your government?
Yes.
So despite what the review said, you said we're going to have a review to look at all. Now, it's either you're going to have a review and decide, or you've decided today. Which is it?
We're a multilateralist party. We believe that if you can get a global deal on getting rid of all nuclear weapons, Britain shouldn't be the only country with nuclear weapons.
I'm sorry to play
sense,
I want to pin you down. Are you in favour of a nuclear deterrent for Britain or not?
While other countries like China and France and other countries like that, the P5 countries, have nuclear weapons, we need to keep our nuclear weapons so we can negotiate them away with others. That's the multilateralist stance. That's a safe stance. But there are alternatives to replacement of Trident on a like-for-like basis. There's extending the life of Trident. There's changing our astute submarines to put cruise missiles with nuclear-tipped weapons on them. There are alternatives. And the former Chief of the Defence Staff, Lord Guthrie, has talked about our proposal being very sensible.
Let's just move on to another aspect, which the start point of which I think is another line in the Liberal Democrat manifesto. This idea that you would not support a military attack on Iran over its nuclear programme. Now, surely, with Britain as a central member of the coalition that has sought for years a non-violent diplomatic resolution to the Iranian nuclear issue, if a British government came in and adopted your policy, you would blow apart that coalition and you would finish off any effective pressure on Iran.
I don't agree. I think many defence experts believe that military attack on Iran is simply not credible, either in terms of overstretch of forces, but more importantly, on whether we would actually get rid of the nuclear threat of Iran. And by taking military action off the table, you enable the other strategies, the diplomatic engagement, the search for sanctions with China and Russia, and support for the domestic reform movement in Iran to have its place. We've got to be supporting the reformists in Tehran, but if we have a military action and threaten them, that's going to play into the hands of President Ahmadinejad.
But ruling it out.
Okay, I don't want to lose this nuclear point, because nuclear policy requires the greatest care, and it has to be done in the most careful way. Now, David Cameron said last week that the reason for us to have nuclear weapons was that we might need to point them at China in the future.
No, he didn't say that.
He did.
He did not say we would point them at China.
In the debate, he said that the reason for us having a nuclear deterrent was because of... let me finish. He said because of Iran and because China might turn in a different direction. Now, first of all, to put China and Iran in the same bracket displays an appalling immaturity. Secondly...
No, he said if China changed in a different direction...
He did not say it would
be like Iran.
He said that we need a nuclear deterrent because China might turn in the wrong direction. Now, we have had 60 years of cooperation with China. We are working with them now. President Hu was at President Obama's summit last week. And frankly, to try to overturn 60 years of cooperation with another Security Council member is grossly irresponsible.
Okay.
The idea that we will help China into the international community to play a full role in the world, to have a really deep relationship with China, the idea you do that by saying that at the back of our minds is this idea that they're going to become a nuclear threat to us is
60 years and you're trying to make China a rogue state.
For the Foreign Secretary to try to whip up a diplomatic dispute in a general election campaign between the opposition and a country we do all work with closely.
Why do you say we need our nuclear weapons in case of China?
He did not say we'd point them at China. David Cameron was illustrating the pace and extent of change in the world and illustrating China as a country that has changed a lot and may change a lot
William, let me tell you why it's
in the coming decade. But I can tell you that let me finish this point. It's very important. David Cameron and I have excellent relations with the Chinese leaders. I had a very successful visit there a few months ago.
So why did you pick them out? Why did you pick them out?
Cameron was illustrating the extent and pace of change in the world. And in fact, the Ministry of Defence's own review, to which David Miliband presumably supports, said that by 2040, China would have much stronger military capability